Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here. We're coming to the end of the first year in the new Dáil, and the Oireachtas Agriculture Committee held its last meeting on Brexit this week before the Christmas break. We've full coverage of the proceedings in this week's Irish Farmers Journal. My colleague Thomas Hubert also interviewed the chairman of the committee, Fine Gael TD Pat Deering, who is a dairy farmer from County Carlow.
Well, it has been an interesting and challenging year. We were formed as a committee in May, June, and we set out our work programme for the year. Initially, we were going to deal with volatility in prices, be it in the dairy sector, be it the sector, or be it the beef sector. And our second issue was going to be the difficulties in the trading practices, especially with the large multiples. Something that the past committee had dealt with, and we felt that there was a bit of unfinished business there. We had recommended previously that there should be an independent arbitrator in that business, something like they have in England, and we decided we'd go investigate that again. But hence then, in the end of June rather, when the British people decided to vote to leave Euro, or rather the European Union, that became the big issue. And we have had a number of different hearings so far, which will continue into the new year, on Brexit and the effect of Brexit from an agriculture point of view, which is a serious issue. I think it has to be dealt with in a very serious way, because as a country, we, in my opinion, have probably more to lose from an agriculture point of view. And we do intend to issue a report on that probably in March.
On the composition of this committee when you started off, are there any people you would have liked to have and couldn't get in, or are you happy with the group you have working with you at the moment? No,
I think we have a reasonably good group. There's a good cross-section. We deal with all sections of agriculture and fisheries as well, which is, again, is an important issue from a Brexit point of view. There's a good cross-section. There's an agricultural element to it, obviously. There's a lot of people who have an in-depth knowledge in agriculture. For example, we have Jackie Cahill, who was a Fianna Fáil TD from Tipperary, who was former president of the ICMSA, who obviously has a lot of knowledge in that area. We have Tim Lombard from Cork, Senator Tim Lombard from Cork, who was a substantial dairy farmer. You know, I myself am a dairy farmer. So there's a lot of, I think, just to name a few, but there's a good cross-section in that regard.
How do you see the sector evolving at the moment? Do you think we're out of the woods? How is it looking for you as a farmer and the farmers around you?
Yeah, well, I suppose it has been a challenging last 18 months or thereabouts from a dairy point of view. There is definitely a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I wouldn't like to say that it's going to go back to where it was, and I don't know whether any farmer wants to go back to where it was. I think it was artificially high 2-3 years ago. But we do seem to have a bit of positivity towards the springtime. We're looking at 30 cents per litre-ish, which I think is encouraging. But I think we're going to have to get used to the idea of volatility. The wheel is going to turn as we had in 2009. I kind of feel that volatility is going to be more cyclical and come around quicker, maybe every 2 years or thereabouts. So I do think we're going to have to be able to plan for that. I think a lot of measures have been taken over the last year or so to ensure that we're better prepared for volatility in the future.
Is this enough? You're talking maybe about taxation options, things like that. Is there any more that could be done at the Irish legislators level to help in those times of volatility?
Yeah, I think that they're the key. The taxation measures are key that we're introducing in the budget in particular. I also feel that the announcement in the budget that the low income or low interest rate loan that the Minister announced, I think that can be a template for the future as well. But I also think that the measure that was announced by the Commission in July, the voluntary reduction issue, I think that can be very beneficial. Even though a large number of Irish farmers didn't buy into that, I think the concept of it stabilised the market, and hence since that we've had things that have levelled off and started to increase. I think the fact that there is a measure there that can deal with overproduction for the future in a voluntary way, I think is important.
Okay, Pat Deering, thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy.
Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Odile Evans was at a farm safety walk in County Clare this week. There she spoke with the farm safety inspector and with the host suckler farmer Martin Fennell. But first, she asked the Minister for Employment and Small Businesses, Pat Breen, how farming compares with the construction and other sectors under his watch.
Well, I suppose I come from a farming background myself, so I'm quite aware with the farming environment. So far this year, 39 people have been killed in workplace accidents. 19 of those are in farming accidents. And, farming only represents 6% of the workforce, so it's a high volume of accidents. There are far more safety, I suppose, controls, I believe, in the construction site. Also, I suppose, in most big contractors that are working in construction safety sites, they have a health and safety officer. And so you're not working on your own like you are. Most farmers are working on their own. It's a small business. I'm the Minister for Small Business, and I treat farming as a small business as well. And of course, farmers are trying to grow their business, and and in difficult times, they're doing things. And sometimes, I suppose, in moments of lack of awareness, people make mistakes. The rural life is very different than it was 20 years ago, where you had 3 to 4 people on a farm. I was raised in a farm where my uncle, my father, and I think there was another uncle as well, so there was plenty of help around. Today's it's quite, the environment in the country is different today. You have a lot of part-time farmers, and there's accidents there as well, where farmers have to come home in the evening and they're maybe run out of daylight, and they're doing things which would normally take maybe a lot more time, and they're rushing. And accidents can happen in that scenario as well. In the blink of an eye, accidents do happen. And my advice to farmers is to ensure that you take time when you're working with machinery to look at the dangers of those machines, what can happen. So, it just takes a little bit of consideration. There are a lot of dangers out there in the farmers said, working with livestock, felling trees, maybe working with chainsaws, which is very dangerous as well. And I have to commend the HSA and the work, and Teagasc, which they're doing here in that. And I think going on a farm here, seeing the dangers for yourself at first hand on site, is much better than looking at it in a slide in a room, when you're doing your green start. But they're important as well. So awareness and farmers talking together. I think it's important farmers do chat together. So it's good to see 20 or 30 farmers here this morning talking together about the dangers. Farmers do need to take precaution. It may cost a few quid, or a few pounds, or a few euros, should I say. But it's nothing like the tragedy that can happen. We've talked about the people that have died this year. Lots of people out there with life-changing situations where they'll never again be able to do what they did in the past, where they lost a limb or they're paralysed. And these are the people you have to think of, their families as well. So this is an opportune time of the year, just before Christmas, to reflect over what farmers, over the last 12 months, the dangers on a farm. Machinery, obviously, and tractors are still the biggest danger out there. Faulty handbrakes, older tractors, all these areas contribute to accidents. And as I said, in the blink of an eye, these things happen. And I've known people myself, neighbours of mine. A neighbour of mine that was killed 2 years ago, and he went out and he's to do his job, and he didn't expect to be a victim of an accident, and unfortunately was. I think we have to learn from accidents and ensure that next Christmas and this Christmas there are less people affected by farm accidents.
I'm here with David Boland from the HSA. You're a farm safety inspector, David, so maybe you could walk me through what you do when you arrive on a farm.
Okay, thank you, Adil. So essentially what we do is when we arrive on a farm, which takes about half an hour to an hour for an inspection, we come along, always unannounced unfortunately, but that's the way we do it, and we arrive and we meet the farmer and we do walk and talk, because primarily the main part of a farm safety inspection. What we like to do is like to walk around the farm, and we like to talk to the farm about all the hazards and accidents that we've seen in the past and how they can prevent them, and that's really what we want to try and do. When I'm on a typical farm, what I do is I talk about the main accident first, which are the tractors, and that's the brakes and the handbrakes, which in over 50% of our accidents, machinery and particular tractors and brakes and handbrakes are the cause of these accidents. So I talk about them. We don't check them, but we talk about them. We ask them to make sure that for their own safety and for their family's safety that they're working properly. We then kind of talk about the next main accident for us is animal handling, and we talk about the accidents that happen there. And everyone, I suppose, knows about the bull at this stage, but really animals that just calved as well, they're an issue for us. And I think everyone knows that maybe the hormones in animals are mad in some way. They can be very dangerous at that time, not just for a couple of days, but for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks after. So we say to the farmer to be aware about these things and to have the right cattle handling facilities in place, both for calving, where they might get hurt, not just killed, but they might get hurt, but also to ensure that nowadays farming is a sole occupation. There's no neighbour really coming to help you out. Make sure you have the right system of gates in place for yourself, so that you don't get caught, you don't get trapped. I suppose the other main accident for us at the moment, really, in some ways, are things like work at heights. So a lot of farmers go onto the roofs up 10, 15 foot, up to do a bit of repair work on a shed. And unfortunately, a lot of accidents happen there where people fall through the roof type, whether it be asbestos cement, whether it be corrugated metal, the perspex. They try to work on the per line, and that really doesn't happen. So we say, look, get someone in to do this for you. If you want to do it yourself, be sure you have good safety system work in place. And we have lots of information in our farm safety booklet about that.
So realistically, farmers have nothing to fear by your arrival in a farmyard. You're only there to talk them through where you've seen hazards before and point out an outsider's view, really, isn't it?
That's a big part of it. We want to point out what the hazards and risks are on the farm. Now, if we do see something that from a safety viewpoint, we say, look, you need to go off with that fixed. We will tell them to do it, and to be fair to most farmers, they will do it. For instance, if there's PTO cover missing, we say, look, go off, get it on, and write back to me to tell me it's done, Now, in certain instances as well, like a vacuum tanker will say, look, you can't use it until you get it fixed, it's too dangerous. And I point out certain things about electricity. I point out, do they have a safety chip switch in place? If they don't, we say, look, go off and get one. Or fencing around the story pit. To be fair to most farmers, these are things that they're going to get done anyway, and we're a bit of a push to get them done,
What are the sort of penalties for not doing it? Or what are the consequences of not doing it once you've pointed it out?
Okay, so I suppose we're one of the organisations that we don't fine or tax people. But if, for instance, to give an example, if I said to someone, look, get a cover on that PTO there, and they didn't put the cover on, and I was chasing them, they didn't have it on, look, to be honest, it's very, very unlikely, but we could, at the end of the day, we could bring them to court, they may get a fine from the judge, that type of stuff, but that's very unlikely, This is about farmer safety, about their own family safety, and that's very unusual for something like that to happen, That's, but there has to be, that is a consequence if you don't get it done, but it's very unlikely. Most farmers, look, I only go to farms for two reasons. Where there's been an accident, where someone's killed or seriously hurt, or like this, where it's a preventive measure. I come along, I walk and talk, point out the hazards, leave a list to get it done, and that's it.
We're here in a farm walk, and farm safety yard of the year, I suppose.
Safety, 2016 Safety Award.
Martin, you have an exceptional yard there, all concreted and everything. What practical steps can you see that other farmers might be able to take onto their own farms?
Well, it depends on their lifestyle, the type of jobs they're working on, if they're full-time farmers, if they have the finances to do these jobs, it depends on their age profile, if they have a generation coming after them, right? We have some people here today who have kids, but they're gone to England, they have no generation coming after them, right? So there's no will there to do it. So you need a will. I'm coming from a situation where I'm in my 50s. I have a youngster of 19. He's gone to do a degree. I'm hoping he'll come back. So I'm putting things in place for him, right? Along with, not alone that, but I'm thinking of my safety and the people I invite onto my farm, right? Their safety as well. So I think for the future, more encouragement for people older than me who have no one coming after them. It's needed, both in financial help, psychological help. They don't see the future. They don't see. It's to give them a vision for the future.
And I suppose that's a key point that we talked about there. A lot of the farm accidents are with people over 65.
That's right.
And it's very difficult, as you say, for them to want to make those changes unless they have a generation come behind them. So how do you incentivise that generation to come into farming, really? Your own son, he's studying now. Do you see him coming back into it?
I'm hoping that by the time he has his 10 years done, gone, his degree, his experience, that I might encourage him to locate his business here. This is what I have for the future for him, is that he might be able to set up, he's doing physiotherapy, I'm hoping he might be able to set up a business which he could run the farm in conjunction with. And that's where people should be trying to look at for rural Ireland, is trying to see, is there something that, like an entrepreneur, right, that I'll encourage him, I'll try and finance him, I'll try and encourage him to set up his business locally, to bring back local employment into the community and to get him to stay within the area. And for the older generation then who has nobody, I think myself, they should be encouraged to set up groups of farmers, set up like co-ops, so that you could, from that co-op, that I could lease a person's land who's over 60 years of age or over 70 years of age, and that I might be able to drive it forward. Someone with a vision that would be able to drive it forward. And there's some farmers here today whose kids are gone away, and they've just let the place run down, right? That to the state where he broke his hip on the farm, right? Because he has no gates hanging, he slipped on stuff that he shouldn't be slipping on, and it's just there's no encouragement for him. Whereas I think people like me, I think it's farmers who can drive farmers, not legislators.
This is where the knowledge transfer and all that comes in.
I'm part of a knowledge transfer group, and we, in the knowledge transfer group, discuss with one another how best. They'd come to me for an open day, they'd see what I have done, I'd explain to them, and they might even copy it. I might even copy something they have done. So I think more emphasis should be put on the knowledge transfer groups to encourage more farmers to be part of knowledge transfer groups. And I think as well increase the incentive for them to come there.
I suppose, here in the west of Ireland, a lot of farmers have a part-time job alongside their farm.
Yes.
And even for those who have retired from that part-time job, for example...
I have retired from a part-time job.
Have you?
I've retired from a full-time. I was in full-time employment for 35 years.
Okay. And can I ask what it was in or what area?
I was with DSB. I was a safety rep with DSB.
Exactly. And I was just talking to another farmer there who was working in Moneypoint, and he's now retired from that as well. But the point being that, when working in Moneypoint, he did plenty of courses in safety and all the rest of it. Older farmers who are, they're retired or whatever, they're not immune to safety. They've dealt with it in their careers. It's just on the farm.
They're not immune. They're immune to change.
Yes.
They're immune to change. They're immune to letting go the purse strings now and again, even if it's for their own good.
Yeah.
Okay. Like as I spoke to some of the HSE people there, if they only updated their machinery on a rotation basis, right? Whereas we had a chap who got his 2 legs cut off with a topper. Recently, he got killed. He died. He bled to death out in the field. But he went down to the topper. He stood on the topper. He was a schoolmate of mine, same age as me. He went down to the topper, cut the 2 legs from him. He bled to death. Right? But that was because it wasn't a shortage of money. It was a shortage of initiative to go and scrap that, get rid of it. It was rotten. It should have been replaced.
And the guys from the HSA were saying that 5 people have been killed in this area in the last 5 years. What sort of an impact has that had on the farming community?
Huge impact. A huge impact. It weakens the morale of farmers. It takes the good out of them. You know what I mean? Farmers. It affects farmers a lot. But the problem is, like the HSA people said, it doesn't affect them enough to act on their own safety. I mean, that's really what it's down to. Will it affect you enough? It would affect me enough. And even I've lost a brother-in-law, my wife's brother, and a young fella in a drowning accident on their farm. Right, the 2 of them got killed in mid-40s and 11 years of age. From that day, that's 10 years ago, from that day I've always said I would make sure, as much as I could, that there would be no accident in my farm. Right? So I learned from that experience. I was there when they were taken up. I had to bring the news to his wife. So from that experience, I have grown into the situation where I'm always correcting my kids over safety. Even if it's just around the house. Right? Don't leave it there. I could fall over it. Put it back where you took it from.
And did they pick it up?
And yes, they picked up my youngster. He's 18, and he went up this morning. He said, "Daddy, you've left him 2 things in a place for someone that fall down top of him." Well, I said, if you think that, you make sure they're right. You see, that's the younger generation being educated by the older generation, whereas it's my generation need to educate the 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds people, because there's quite a number of farmers in the 60-70 bracket in this country. A lot of farmers. There is a vast majority because the younger generation have gone working and haven't come back.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, Peter McCann was at the Winter Fair organised by the Royal Ulster Agricultural Society in Lisburn. There he gauged the mood of Northern Ireland's dairy farmers as the milk price crash seems to be coming to an end.
You've always been able to spend money where it needed to be spent, and the maintaining the farm and ongoing general expenditure, but maybe weren't able to make the capital investments that we wanted, which is frustrating because you see areas where you can improve the business and you just weren't able to capitalise the opportunities that were there. And tried to cull cows that needed to be culled, trying to take it back. Anything that's not efficient was been got rid of, but then again you should be trying to maximise milk from forage through good times as well. It's been a long pull recently, but hopefully we'll be getting into a sustained period of better prices that'll benefit all in the industry. with the way milk price and everything went, you try to tighten down the hatches and try and get everything, try and cut your costs as much as possible. But at the same time, if you're running a fishing business, you shouldn't be able to cut any more off them. But you're trying your best. You're reducing what your output is. Because at the minute that is the problem. There's too much milk, so you try to reduce a bit. Less is more at the end of the day. You don't want to be. I would rather be good at something before I would get better or get bigger at it. Going ahead, there's a bit more optimism. You can see milk price rising. It's sort of up there at the minute. As long as it going into the new year, if it's going to keep up, it's only high at the minute because there's a big winter bonus on it, like 3p last month. Coming into the new year, you need that. We need that same price we're getting at the minute. If that drops back again, which I don't think it will, it's going to stay up. The company's brought out this fixed price scheme, but they wouldn't be offering that money if they didn't think it's going to be that price.
Obviously very difficult the past couple of years. Started last season we bought a zero grazer and try and get more milk from forage. It's worked quite well over the year. Pretty happy with it. Good grass utilisation and it's lowered our cost of production. And quite optimistic and excited for the incoming year. I think things will improve.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Earlier this week, the Irish Farmers Journal's market specialist Phelim O'Neill was in Brussels for the Council of European Agriculture Ministers. There he met both Commissioner Phil Hogan and Minister for Agriculture Michael Creed.
Minister, is it fair to say today's proceedings at Council were dominated by the climate change discussion and the unfair trading practices legislation, or the potential of, I suppose we should call it at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the latter, that's caused quite a considerable amount of debate, but it is very welcome the fact that, this is a report that's around a short number of weeks. It's not gathering dust. We're trying to finalise Council conclusions on the report today. And I think the anticipated fault lines on the report have emerged in the context of the member states that agree with a pan-European legislative framework and those that are somewhat resistant to that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, as a food exporting island, we believe with 90% of our produce going globally and a lot of it to European Union member states, we believe that that kind of pan-European regulatory legislative framework is necessary and would be beneficial for us and for our exporters and farmers and our food businesses. But there are countries who believe that this is an area of domestic competence where they have legislation already and are kind of a bit more reluctant. Uh-huh. So we're trying to square that circle. I suppose the usual suspects, without using that in pejorative term, would be clearly identifiable in context of resistance to those proposals: the Dutch, the Danes, the Swedes, the Germans and the UK. There's some resistance there for different reasons. Some already have a legislative framework. But we're trying to finalise, and we're keeping that issue of a legislative framework on the table, and that's important. And whilst the Commission will have to do some further work in the matter.
Do you feel today then was just really as a noting of the report, or did it progress at all? Have you? I know countries like Ireland will have to persuade those that aren't as minded towards legislation to get on board for it. Do you feel that has moved forward today, or is it still really just a case of noting it and talking around it?
I think it has moved forward, and I think the fact that we're moving towards conclusions of Council on this that we can all sign up to is important, and then the Commission will take it away and take the next steps in terms of progressing in consultation with all member states, in particular the area of a legislative response, which is what we are very anxious remains on the table.
And does that mean that we're heading towards a watered down response from what the task force recommended?
No, I hope not. I think from talking to my German colleagues, the concern they have is that they just don't want to reinvent the wheel. They have a legislative framework already, which they're quite satisfied serves their farmers' interests quite well. And we're kind of going to see how we can bridge the gap between that reluctance to kind of duplicate and the fact that there would be an effective cross-European
So
response.
It's still all to play for, but there's work to be done to persuade your colleagues to come along.
And from our point of view, obviously, we're clear in what we want, but we're also clear that, we can't bulldoze our way to that. Mm-hmm. We have to convince people and cajole people, and I think the Commission is in our corner in respect of the draft conclusions that are published, and we hope to be able to progress that.
Commissioner Hogan joins us on the podcast this evening. We're going to deal with a couple of things in particular, the unfair trading practices, potential legislation, I suppose we could call it at this stage in light of the recent task force report. And even though it doesn't seem that long since the last Common Agricultural Policy was signed off and went into implementation, the discussions on the 2020 version are, you might say, already underway, and the various groups and interested parties are putting the marker down. Commissioner Hogan, if we start with the unfair trading practices legislation, I know it got a hearing at Council today. Were you happy that the Council might be on board for this? Because I know reports are that it's very much divided amongst those that believe in voluntary or individual member state and those that believe in collective EU. Do you feel the Council can be persuaded on this?
Well, the Council reviewed the situation regarding unfair trading practices, and indeed the work of the Agri Market Task Force as well fed into that particular discussion. But I'm glad to say that the Slovakian presidency have reached unanimity today in the Council of Agricultural Ministers on proceeding to the next step of doing something about unfair trading practices, as well as open up greater transparency in relation to pricing.
And can you tell us what that next step is?
Well, we have a mandate now from the Council after today. We're going to evaluate the recommendations of the Agri Market Task Force. And the Parliament, of course, as you saw, had a very strong vote in recent times saying that the Commission should do something about it as well, in terms of giving a better situation to the farmer in the context of the other actors in the food chain. So we have it in the Commission work programme for 2017. So I expect that the Commission will be bringing forward proposals in 2017, and of course it will be preceded by an impact assessment.
So we'll have an impact assessment, and depending on the outcome of that impact assessment, then we will see legislation or we won't see legislation.
Exactly. But there is a determination, it seems to me, by many member states to consider an EU harmonised approach to the issue of dealing with the position of the farmer in the food chain. Because if you have 20 member states taking national measures, it demonstrates clearly that there's a problem in the view of those member state delegations, and they expressed that today.
Right. So the notion then that this could be somehow thwarted or blocked by countries that are strongly of a view that any action should be voluntary or done at the individual national level, that's not necessarily going to carry the day. There's an independent work programme that's been put in place that will address this and give it further consideration at least.
Well, when you have 20 member states out of 28 suggesting that there's a problem, there's a good chance that they want to see an EU harmonised approach to dealing with this. And whether it is legislation or non-legislative measures, we have to see the outcome of the impact assessment. But there's a very positive view today in the Agricultural Council that we should take action to help the farmer's position in the food chain.
Okay, that will be welcome, Commissioner. If we might move on, I suppose the next big issue that's on the table, coming on to it, I suppose, more formally at the start of the new year, and that is the 2020 version of the Common Agricultural Policy. I know you've spoken about that recently at the Outlook conference. You see that as a three-pronged or a three-pillar element to it from your own perspective.
Yes, at our annual conference in the European Union Agriculture last week, both President Juncker and I clearly stated that we needed to have a look again at the tools that we have available for market resilience, which will be the first body of work. Then we have to implement our international agreements on climate and sustainable development. So that's the issue of sustainability will be important as the second pillar. And thirdly, we have to look at how we can get more young people into farming, and that's generation renewal. So, of course, built on these issues and these particular blocks of work are built on the back of simplifying the policy. So all of that is going to constitute, again, a public consultation which will start early in 2017, and we'll have a communication of what those issues are, rising that consultation at the end of 2017, and then I will be bringing forward a legislative proposal to see how the reform of the CAP should be post-2020 arising from that.
I suppose, observing somewhat from the outside, it's easy to visualise plenty of problems with the next CAP. First of all, we have the budget issue with the loss of a net contributor in the UK who will be leaving, and we also then have the issue of, I suppose, people that last time round felt that the environmental considerations didn't get the priority they should have. They're certainly not going to be placated very easily this time round.
No, they're all very important issues. Of course, the budget discussions will start at the end of 2017, and then they cannot be concluded until we see the outcome of the Brexit negotiations. So there's a lot of balls in the air, as it were, in relation to what's happening in relation to the budget. But secondly, we have to continue our work in the meantime on the policy side, and we'll strike the balance on the budgetary side when every other Prime Minister every Prime Minister in the EU comes to that conclusion, of which there are 27 at the end of 2019.
Finally, you've identified plenty of issues there already. I suppose the other one that would be in the minds of Irish farmers to some extent, under the last Commission, the CAP took a direction of moving towards the flat rate payment, of moving towards a land-based system. Do you visualise a continuation of that programme, or do you see maybe something more of a reversal back to the support of productive agriculture as opposed to just making a flat rate land-based payment system?
Well, I'm not going to get into what the final outcome of the CAP negotiations is this evening, Phil, and I know you wouldn't want me to, but people will have an opportunity to express their views in the public consultation programme. But we have a number of objectives that we want to see in the next reform, and that is the market resilience aspects in order to help farmers to overcome volatility in some sectors, the sustainability of agriculture, and various programmes that will be required to help us in relation to the environment and climate change in particular. We cannot ignore these particular matters, and farmers are well placed to take advantage of being the ones that will implement policies to help us there, and of course get more young people into the agricultural sector. So we have a lot of work to do on the policy side. We have to wait and see what the budget will be like, but you can take it that the level of environmental ambition will not be lower.
And I know you have a very clear programme there, and you have a collective responsibility. Do you have a personal view on it at all?
I have a lot of personal views. I have a lot of personal views, a lot of things, but of course in this position I have to say what the collective view is of the Commission.
Commissioner Hogan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy.
Last Friday, representatives from the whole cattle farming industry met in County Kildare to decide on the next steps in tackling Johne's disease. Thomas Hubert was there, and he got the latest from Animal Health Ireland's Chief Executive, Joe O'Flaherty.
This meeting today comes on the back of a series of meetings that we've been having with our stakeholders over the last number of months. We have sat down with 13 or 14 of our key stakeholders, and we've had written submissions from others. And really the purpose of the meeting today was to come together in relation to the future of Johne's disease control in Ireland, to try to get at the meeting today an agreement in principle in terms of how we would move this programme forward. I think on foot of the meeting we have an agreement in principle from stakeholders, and the challenge for Animal Health Ireland now is to work on the detail of how that actually translates into reality in a new programme in 2017.
So what's the consensus here? What are people happy to do to tackle Johne's? Maybe what are they not happy to do? Because we've seen compulsory programs. I don't think that's the way we're going to tackle this. So what's the consensus here?
Yeah, certainly it isn't a compulsory programme that is envisaged here. This is a voluntary, encouraged programme of participation. And I suppose our stakeholders recognise the challenges in engaging farmers in relation to Johne's control. And that comes down to the fact that the economics tell us that the drivers for farmer participation in Johne's control programmes are weak. There isn't a good, strong economic incentive as there is in relation to other diseases like BVD. So it's a universal challenge. Every country in the world that has Johne's disease faces these same challenges. And Animal Health Ireland has looked across the world at other options for making Johne's disease control more sustainable. We've looked particularly at countries like Canada and at Australia, where they have, in order to make their Johne's disease control programme more sustainable, they have broadened out the remit of the programme to incorporate other elements that sit very well with Johne's control. They're synergistic with the Johne's control elements. So, for example, improved calf health or improved on-farm biosecurity. So we know that we can build off the already good platform that we have from the pilot programme to incorporate these other elements. And the benefit of doing that is that we think, and we're fairly confident, we can demonstrate rapid feedback to the farmers, rapid benefits in terms of better calf health, better farm biosecurity, and critically reduced use of antimicrobials, antibiotics on the farm. So we think that there is a real opportunity in what we're proposing here today to tackle a number of issues. While we continue with our focus on Johne's disease, we build on some of the natural synergies with other control programmes that we're interested in.
When we're talking about a voluntary programme, does that mean it would be up to each individual farmer to decide if they take part, or would it be each co-op? What kind of level of decision are we looking at?
No, it is at the farmer level, and this reflects what was done in the pilot programme, where it was on the basis of each farmer who wanted to come in, enrolled in the programme and signed up to a set of terms and conditions. So ultimately it is the individual farmer who will decide whether it's in his or her interest to come into a programme or not come into a programme. And I think the challenge for us, and it's a challenge we're very much up for, is to demonstrate that there is actually value back to the farmer by participating. Fewer sick calves, lower calf mortality, better farm biosecurity, lower use of antimicrobials on the farm. So we hope that over time we will encourage more and more farmers in. And I think really if we can't demonstrate we're adding value back to the farmers, farmers just won't participate. So we do not want to do anything to frustrate farmers. We want to assist them in terms of their management of their farm and the profitability of their farm. And ultimately, the market will dictate whether we're successful or not. Farmers will either come into the programme or they'll stay out of it.
You're talking about the economic balance of the programme. Would there be additional costs involved and any avenues to cover those costs?
Yeah, there are always costs in programmes, and the key elements of cost in this programme that we are now embarked on are around an on-farm intervention, which would be between the farmer and the trained local veterinary practitioner. There's a cost to running that, and we've met those costs within the pilot programme in a different way, but they will continue to need to be met. And there are costs relating to testing for Johne's disease. So those are the two key components. And really what we're trying to figure out today is how best those costs might be met. And we're still at the level of agreement in principle. We need to get into detail and to tie down the budgets and the timelines for all of this. But what we are envisaging at the moment is that the Department of Agriculture would take a greater role in meeting some of the testing costs, and that the milk processors would play a greater role in meeting some of the on-farm risk assessment and management intervention costs.
Do you know what kind of time frame you're looking at before this is put into place?
Well, we want this to be rolled out in 2017, so we have quite a bit of work to do in a relatively short period of time. But that's a challenge we're going to take on, because Johne's disease and these other issues of calf health and antimicrobial resistance don't wait around for us to catch up. So we will implement a programme early in 2017. We have already scheduled a meeting of our implementation group for Friday the 16th of December. We will be taking on the detailed planning from that meeting and forward.
Just one last question for somebody who's never been confronted with Johne's disease. What is it, and why is it important to tackle it?
It's an important disease at farm level, because the affected animals that are infected with this disease progressively waste away. They develop a chronic wasting condition and will ultimately die. So there's an animal welfare component. There's also a farm management component. So for the farmer who knows that he has a case of Johne's disease in the herd, there is the stress of managing that particular animal, ensuring that her welfare is properly looked after, ensuring that other animals in the herd don't become infected through this infected animal. We know from the economic analysis presented to us that, as I said earlier, there is not a very strong economic driver for farmers when the disease is present at very low levels in the herd. But naturally enough, if you leave the disease uncontrolled within a herd, over time it grows in importance and it grows in prevalence in the herd, and then it does become an economic crisis. So what we're about here is trying to find means of encouraging farmers into a programme, once they're in the programme, to encourage them then to tackle Johne's infection head on. And the other component, and probably more positively, is that we know that we have a much lower prevalence of disease in Ireland than in many other countries in Europe. So we're actually starting from a good position. So the programme is as much focused on keeping the vast majority of herds that are clear of the disease, keeping them clear, as it is focused on the smaller percentage of herds that have the disease, in allowing them to control the infection over time.
Joe, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy.
If you missed the first ever Agri Careers Fair earlier this year, the Irish Farmers Journal and Open Air are soon to give you yet another chance to meet hundreds of recruiters across the agriculture and food industry. Irish Country Living Careers editor Mary Phelan updates Thomas Hubert on the preparations.
Agri Careers is back with a bang for 2017. We have launched the Agri Careers Fair. It is taking place on the 30th of March in the RUAS, and this will be the second time this event has ever taken place. We ran the inaugural Agri Careers Fair this year in 2016. It was extremely successful. We had almost 50 exhibitors, 7,000 people at least turned up on the day.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was huge. You were there yourself, so you know.
The queue.
And I guess the most important thing was that we had 1,120 jobs, live roles available on the day across all of our employer exhibitors. So this year we are going to do the same all over again, and I guess we're just hoping that we'll have more exhibitors, more jobs and more people. And the big news is that we've moved into the main hall in the RDS, which is twice the size of where we were last year. So we have a big hall to fill.
Great. Okay. Now, you had a launch event this week, and you were highlighting the fact that 1 in 8 jobs in Ireland is supported by the agricultural industry. What can you tell us about this?
Yes, so we wanted to show the importance of the sector to the economy. And I mean, if you think about it, to have 1 in 8 jobs supported by the agri industry, it's absolutely huge. And I don't think enough people know this. So we want to shout it from the rooftops. So what's even more interesting is that while 1 job, for example, in food manufacturing supports 5 additional jobs across the economy, this is not the same in other sectors. For example, with foreign direct investment, every 1 job in that particular area just supports 1 other job. So I think it's really important that we get that message out there. You know, there might be lots of people out there who are working or who have qualifications in other sectors who may not think that the agri sphere is for them. But when 1 in every 8 jobs in this country is supported by the agri industry, how can this sector not be for you? How can you not at least take a look and see what jobs are available? Because the quality of jobs are very, very good. That's one of the things that we wanted to highlight with the fair. And I guess one of the reasons that we set up the fair in the first place was not only did we want to help the employers get high quality talent into their businesses, but we also wanted to show the rest of the country just how much is going on in recruitment in this sector.
Okay, and we're not going it alone. We're supported by Open Air again this year. So how are they going to help?
So Open Air are our partners once again for this year. We're absolutely delighted to have them on board. It's a really good fit, the Farmers Journal with Open Air, because they are in the process of rolling out high-speed broadband all over the country. And of course, but quite a lot of agri-businesses are based in rural Ireland. It is really crucial that they have high-speed broadband so that they can function, and that's what Open Air is all about, is rural high-speed broadband. You know, you think of very simple things like even marketing on social media. That's something that you need broadband for. You know, it can also give employers a bit more flexibility in terms of you don't have to maybe bring all of your employees to an office in an urban area. Employees can work from home if they have high-speed broadband working in rural areas. So really, they couldn't be a better fit for what we're all about, and we're just delighted to have them again. They're very, very good to work with.
Okay, and I'm sure there will be talks about this ways to work, ways of commuting. That was part of the fair last year, I remember. So looking forward to all that. What else will be happening?
So one of the big things, I guess, at the fair this year, something brand new, is we are going to have the Ag Tech Summit. Now, this is actually taking place. There's an evening event the day before the fair on the 29th, while there will also be an Ag Tech Hub that's running at the fair itself. So the evening event, there will be lots of experts and businesses coming together for couch sessions. You know, you might be familiar from seeing this at other conferences.
Women in Ag and all those.
Yes, Women in Ag amongst them. And they will, you know, be sharing their stories and their knowledge and their experience and how they came to be established in the sector. So, you know, that's something that we're really looking forward to. And the Ag Tech Hub will be a hive of activity the next day, and the finer details for that have yet to be tied down. But I can promise you it's going to be very, very exciting, and we're very excited about it. And I guess really, if I was just to conclude about the fair, what I would say is that Justin McCarthy, the editor of this very paper, here has a mantra that the best assets in this company go up and down the lift every day. So we have a lift in the farm centre. There's 3 floors here, and he knows that it's the right people who make a business successful. So from an employer point of view, it is crucial that you get the right people into your business, but also from an employee perspective, it's very important that you find a company that's the right fit for you. And even if you're just scoping out the scene and kind of want to get a flavour of what it's about, you might already have a job, but even just to suss things out, see if the agri sector is for you, come along on the day and at the very least have a very casual chat with employers and just, you could be lining up some options for yourself down the line.
Okay, so that's all happening on the 30th of March. Looking forward to it.
Yes.
And we can read a lot more in this week's Country Living. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, Thomas, thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by RUAS, the home of Irish dairy.